All right, get ready because today we are really digging deep into this 2-hour lecture on regaining effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And not just at work, but like in every single area of your life,
Wow.
trying to, advance in your career, stay healthy, maintain relationships,
Right.
all at the same time, keep your sanity. And this lecture, what's interesting, it approaches effectiveness kind of holistically.
Mhm.
So we're going to explore how all those pieces fit together and
Yeah.
pull out some really actionable insights.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about this lecture is how it really
Yeah.
reframes effectiveness. It really emphasizes that if you're neglecting any one of these areas,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's physical health,
Mm-hmm.
mental well-being, relationships, your personal growth, or your professional life,
Yeah.
it really creates this kind of ripple effect
Mm.
and hinders your effectiveness in other areas that you might not think are connected.
Totally. It's like
Uh,
that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't expect to perform well if you're not taking care of those essential things across the board.
Yeah, yeah. And the lecture, it kicks off by talking about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness.
Oh, interesting.
We often get so caught up in doing things right, but are we actually doing the right
Oh,
thing?
that's so true. Like you can be a pro at color coding your email inbox while your actual goals are just gathering dust. I've been there.
Exactly, exactly.
But how do we even begin to prioritize when we're constantly bombarded with demands from all directions? You know?
Well, the lecture kind of digs into the importance of mental clarity,
Okay.
and it makes this point that it's really the foundation for making effective decisions in any area of your life.
Yeah.
It even suggests that chronic stress not only makes us feel frazzled,
Mm.
but it actually impairs our cognitive function.
Totally. I've definitely felt that kind of brain fog when I'm stressed out.
Right.
Like you're trying to think through this thick fog. So what's the antidote? What do we do? How do we reclaim that mental clarity when it feels like our minds are just spinning out of control?
So the lecture advocates for a few different practical techniques.
Okay.
One of them is mindfulness meditation, which you're probably familiar with.
Yeah.
But it also introduces this thing called the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique.
Oh, I've heard of that. Is it the one where you have to come up with 5 things you can see,
Yeah.
4 things you can touch,
Hmm.
3 things you can hear,
Yep.
2 things you can smell,
Uh,
and 1 thing you can taste?
that's the one.
Okay. I've heard of it. I've never tried it. Trying to come up with 5 things I can smell always kind of throws me off.
Well, the idea is to engage all of your senses to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
bring you back to the present moment.
Right.
It's really about interrupting those kind of racing thoughts and anchoring yourself
Mm-hmm.
in your immediate surroundings.
Yeah.
Maybe you could adapt it.
Oh.
If there's one sense that doesn't work so well for you, focus on the ones that do.
Okay. Yeah. I can get behind that. So we've tackled the mental clutter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do we actually carve out the time to focus on what matters?
Right.
I know the lecture goes into time management.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes beyond just like the typical to-do list strategies.
Okay.
It reminds us that time is really our most valuable resource. It's something you can't replenish.
That's a great point.
You can only manage it.
It's not about cramming more into your schedule. It's about being intentional with how you spend the time that you have.
Exactly. So while the lecture does touch on, familiar frameworks like the Eisenhower matrix
Mm-hmm.
for prioritization, it also digs deeper into techniques like the Pomodoro technique. Have you heard of that one?
Oh, yeah. Pomodoro. That's the one where you work in focused intervals
Mhm.
and then you take breaks, right?
Exactly. 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, repeat that 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah. Big fan of Pomodoro. But I'll admit, I often find myself, mindlessly scrolling during those breaks,
Oh, yeah.
which kind of defeats the purpose. Does the lecture give any advice for making those breaks truly restorative?
Yeah. So it suggests theming your breaks.
Oh, okay.
So instead of just checking social media, do something that actually combats mental fatigue.
Yeah.
So maybe it's 5 minutes of stretching, maybe it's doing some mindful breathing, maybe it's just getting up and taking a quick walk.
I love that. It's like a mini recharge for your brain and your body.
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, that's good. Now, the lecture also tackles procrastination, okay?
Good too.
Because we all struggle with that. And I think
Right.
it even acknowledges that procrastination is often rooted in deeper issues
Mm.
like fear of failure or perfectionism.
hmm
Oh, tell me about it.
Sometimes just the thought of starting a big project makes me just run for the nearest distraction.
Right.
So does the lecture offer any solutions for chronic procrastinators like myself? Well, it dives into a couple of different strategies. One of them is called the 2-minute rule,
Okay.
which basically says if a task takes less than 2 minutes, just do it now.
Okay.
Don't put it off. And then another one is this kind of funny one. It's called eat that frog.
Eat that frog. What does that even mean?
Yeah. It means tackle your most dreaded task first thing in the morning.
Okay.
The idea is that once you've kind of eaten the frog, everything else feels easier by comparison.
I see the logic in that. But what if, like, my biggest frog is actually, like, waking up early? Any advice for the night owls out there?
Well, the lecture doesn't specifically address that, but maybe the principle could be adapted,
Yeah.
Find your own peak productivity time
All right.
and schedule your frog for then,
Yeah.
whether that's morning, noon, or night.
Okay. That's a helpful reframing. So we've decluttered our minds. We've gotten a handle on time management, at least in theory. What's the next piece of the effectiveness puzzle?
Okay. So from there, the lecture shifts gears a little bit,
Right.
and it goes into the realm of emotional resilience.
Okay.
And it really emphasizes that this is so important for navigating, the inevitable setbacks and challenges that we all face in life.
Because life rarely goes according to plan.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not about avoiding the tough stuff. It's about equipping ourselves to bounce back from those inevitable curveballs.
Yeah, yeah. That's such a good point. So how do we cultivate that kind of resilience? What specific approaches does the lecture recommend?
Okay, so one key element is developing something called a growth mindset,
Okay.
which is the belief that you can actually learn and grow from challenges rather than viewing them as personal failures.
I've heard of a growth mindset. Yeah. But how do you actually, like, shift from a fixed mindset where you feel kind of limited by your abilities to one where you really embrace those challenges as opportunities for growth?
It's definitely a process,
Yeah.
and the lecture does go into specific strategies. But another really important element is self-compassion,
Oh, yeah.
which is essentially treating yourself with kindness,
Right.
especially when things are tough.
That is so important. It's so easy to fall into that cycle of self-criticism, which is just so draining and so counterproductive.
Absolutely.
And the lecture also emphasizes something else, right?
Yes, it really emphasizes the importance of vulnerability and support.
Okay.
So it's about recognizing that we don't have to go through those challenges alone.
Yeah.
And it's about, really building strong connections with other people who can provide encouragement and understanding.
We've all heard that saying, it takes a village, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like building that supportive network is just crucial for our emotional well-being and ultimately for our
Yes.
effectiveness in every other area of our life, too.
Exactly. And speaking of connection, the next section of the lecture really focuses on the role of relationships
Okay.
in our overall effectiveness, which is something that we often overlook.
That's interesting, yeah. You don't always think of relationships as being directly tied to your, work or personal growth.
Right. But the lecture really argues that healthy relationships are vital for both our mental well-being
Yeah.
and our professional success.
And they actually fuel and reinforce each other.
So it's not an either situation. It's not like you have to choose between nurturing your relationships or pursuing your ambitions. They actually can work together.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, strong relationships don't just happen magically.
Right.
So what does the lecture say about actually building and maintaining those connections?
Okay, so it emphasizes the importance of effective communication. It even provides specific tools for, things like active listening, assertive communication, and conflict resolution.
That sounds incredibly valuable. I feel like most of us, we don't really get formal training in these skills.
Yeah.
Or kind of left to figure it out on our own.
Yeah. So what are some of the key insights the lecture offers in that area?
Okay. So one of the big things it encourages us to do is to approach communication with the intention of really trying to understand the other person's perspective rather than just waiting for our turn to speak,
Oh, that's good.
right? And it also stresses the importance of expressing our own needs and boundaries clearly and respectfully.
Yeah. That's so important, too. It's like finding that balance between being assertive and being empathetic. Does the lecture talk about how to handle conflict? Because let's face it, disagreements are inevitable in any relationship.
Yeah. It does talk about that, and it stresses the importance of approaching conflict with this kind of collaborative mindset.
Okay.
So you're not trying to win the argument.
Right. Yeah.
You're really seeking to find a solution that works for everyone involved.
Yeah.
And it even gives you specific strategies for kind of de-escalating those tense situations and finding that common ground.
That sounds incredibly useful. I'm always looking for ways to navigate those tricky conversations more effectively. It's like having a toolkit for communication.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It really gives you some tools that you can use in your daily life.
Okay, so we've covered mental clarity, time management, emotional resilience, and the power of relationships. What's next on our journey to greater effectiveness?
Okay, so now we dive into the area of professional effectiveness. And it really moves beyond just the idea of like working hard, and it focuses on really achieving meaningful results.
Okay, this is where I get excited. Because I'm always looking for ways to work smarter, not just harder.
Yeah.
So what insights does the lecture offer on that front?
Well, it starts by emphasizing the importance of setting clear career goals.
Right.
Knowing what you're working towards gives your efforts direction and purpose.
That makes sense. It's like having a destination in mind when you set out on a journey.
Exactly.
If you don't have that goal, you're just kind of wandering aimlessly.
Right. Right. And the lecture actually provides a framework for really identifying your values, your passions, and your skills, and then using those to set goals that are both meaningful and achievable.
I love that. So it's about aligning your work with what truly matters to you. What other kind of gems does the lecture offer in terms of professional effectiveness?
Okay, so it also stresses the importance of continuous learning.
Yeah.
We live in a world that's constantly changing.
Yeah.
So it's crucial to stay curious, to keep learning, and to really adapt to new challenges and opportunities.
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's taking courses or reading books, attending workshops, finding a mentor, there's so many ways to expand our knowledge and skill set these days. I'm sure the lecture talks about productivity hacks too, right?
Yeah, it touches on that as well. It goes back to the Eisenhower matrix for prioritizing tasks.
Okay.
Really focusing on those high-impact activities that align with your goals. It also emphasizes the power of delegation.
Delegation. That can be a game changer, but I think it's also something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
So what insights does the lecture offer on delegating effectively?
So it encourages us to let go of the need for perfection.
Okay.
To trust others to do the job, even if they don't do it exactly the way we would.
Yeah.
And it also stresses the importance of providing clear instructions and support to those we delegate to.
Yeah. It's about empowering others and really freeing up your time and energy to focus on the things that only you can do.
Exactly. And finally, the lecture tackles this concept of work-life integration,
Okay.
which goes beyond the traditional idea of work-life balance.
Wait, work-life integration, what's the difference?
So it's about recognizing that work and life aren't these separate compartments that need to be perfectly balanced.
Okay.
Instead, it's about finding ways to blend them
Yeah.
in a way that works for you.
Yeah.
And it acknowledges that, especially in today's world,
Right.
those lines can get really blurry.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see the difference. It's not about rigidly separating work and life. It's about finding a way to make them flow together more seamlessly.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the lecture provides some strategies for achieving this.
Right.
Like setting those clear boundaries. Remember we talked about that earlier. And being intentional about how you spend your time and energy.
Because when it comes down to it, effectiveness is about making choices, right?
Yes.
Conscious choices that align with our values and our goals.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the final section of the lecture, which might seem a bit surprising.
Okay.
It's about physical health.
I was surprised to see that included, too.
Yeah.
You don't always think about physical health as being a part of the productivity conversation.
Right. But the lecture really makes a case for why it's the foundation of everything else.
Okay.
It emphasizes that exercise, nutrition, and sleep are so crucial for maintaining our energy, our focus, and even our emotional resilience.
All connected, right? You can't expect to be firing on all cylinders mentally and emotionally if you're neglecting your physical well-being.
Exactly. And the lecture highlights how even small changes in these areas can have a significant impact on our overall effectiveness.
So it's not about becoming a marathon runner or a health guru overnight. It's about making those sustainable changes that you can incorporate into your daily life.
Exactly.
Okay. Does the lecture offer any specific advice for combating burnout? Because I think a lot of us are feeling, stretched thin these days.
Yeah, it does talk about that. And actually, the lecture ends with a kind of stark warning about burnout.
Okay.
It describes it as a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that's caused by prolonged exposure to stress. And it stresses that self-care isn't selfish.
Right.
It's actually essential for preventing burnout
Yeah.
and maintaining long-term effectiveness.
That's such a powerful message.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we really need to prioritize our well-being, and not just for our own sake, but so that we can show up as our best selves
Yes.
in all areas of our lives.
You got it.
This has been incredibly insightful. I don't know about you, but I'm already starting to rethink my approach to effectiveness.
Yeah, me too.
But before we wrap up this first part, I have one more question. Does the lecture offer any specific advice for how to put all this into action? Because it's one thing to understand the concepts, but it's another thing entirely to actually implement them, you know?
It absolutely does. It gives us a number of practical tools and strategies. In fact, it suggests a specific exercise that we can all try.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the exercise?
Well, it asks us to take a moment to reflect on all of the areas that we've discussed. So, the mental clarity, the time management, the emotional resilience, the relationships, the professional effectiveness, the physical health. And then it asks us to identify just one small step that we can take
Okay.
in one of these areas to start moving towards greater effectiveness.
I love that. It's about taking action, not just absorbing information. Mm-hmm.
But we're going to have to save that discussion for the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground already, and I'm sure our listeners need a little time to process all of this.
definitely.
So for now, we'll leave you with that thought-provoking question. What one small step can you take today to start moving in the right direction?
We'll dive deeper into that question
Yeah.
and explore some practical strategies for taking action in the next part of our deep dive.
Until then, happy reflecting.
See you soon.
Okay, we've unpacked a lot in the first part of our deep dives into this effectiveness lecture. We've explored the idea that it's not just about work hacks, but about aligning different dimensions of our lives. We've even dipped our toes into mental clarity, time management techniques, and the importance of building emotional resilience.
It's fascinating how the lecture emphasizes that neglecting any of these areas creates a ripple effect, hindering your effectiveness in seemingly unrelated areas. Right. It's like that old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. But now I'm wondering, how do we actually put all this knowledge into action? It's one thing to listen to a lecture. It's another thing entirely to make lasting changes in our lives.
You've hit on a key point. The lecture doesn't just throw information at you and call it a day. It actually provides some concrete steps for putting these principles into practice.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's step one?
The lecture suggests starting with a self-assessment. Take a look at those 5 key areas we've been discussing: physical health, mental well-being, relationships, professional growth, and personal growth. Which one feels like it needs the most attention right now?
So it's about choosing our battle, so to speak, focusing our energy where it's needed most.
Exactly. It's easy to feel overwhelmed if we try to tackle everything at once. By choosing one area to focus on, we can make more meaningful progress.
Makes sense. So let's say I've identified that my relationships need some TLC. What's the next step?
Then, the lecture suggests setting a SMART goal. You've probably heard of this acronym before: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Yeah, SMART goals are a classic. But I'll admit, sometimes they feel a little too corporate-y for my personal life.
I get that.
Yeah.
But the principle can be applied to any area of life, even relationships. For example, instead of a vague goal like improve my communication with my partner, a SMART goal might be, for the next month, I'll commit to having a 30-minute conversation with my partner every evening where we put away our phones and just focus on listening to each other.
Okay, I see how framing it that way makes it more concrete and actionable. You have a specific plan, a way to measure your progress, and a time frame for achieving your goal.
Precisely. And the lecture emphasizes that it's important to choose goals that are meaningful to you. It's
Right.
not about checking boxes or following someone else's formula for success.
It's about creating a life that feels fulfilling and authentic, right?
Exactly. And once you've set a SMART goal, the lecture provides some practical tips for staying on track. One that I found particularly helpful is breaking down your goal into smaller, more manageable steps.
That's a classic strategy for overcoming overwhelm. It's much easier to take action when you're facing a series of small hills instead of one giant mountain.
Right. So instead of trying to overhaul your entire communication style overnight, maybe you start by focusing on one specific aspect, like active listening.
I like that. Focus on really paying attention to what your partner is saying without interrupting or jumping in with your own thoughts and opinions. just listening with the intention of understanding.
Exactly. And you could even set a mini goal for yourself, like, for the next week, I'll practice active listening for at least 10 minutes every day.
Okay, so we've broken down our big goal into smaller steps. What else can we do to stay motivated and keep those changes going?
The lecture emphasizes the importance of consistency. It's those small, consistent actions repeated over time that lead to lasting change.
I've heard it said that motivation gets you started, but habit keeps you going.
Exactly. And the lecture suggests some clever ways to build those habits. One is to link your new behavior to an existing routine.
Ooh, that's interesting. Can you give me an example?
Let's say you're trying to make exercise a regular part of your routine. Instead of just telling yourself you'll go to the gym more often, you might link your workout to an existing habit, like brushing your teeth. You tell yourself, every time I brush my teeth in the morning, I'll do 10 push-ups.
I love that. It's a simple way to make those new behaviors automatic.
Right. And as you repeat that action over time, it becomes less about willpower and more about ingrained habit.
So we've got our SMART goals, we've broken them down into smaller steps, and we're linking those new behaviors to existing routines. What else can we do to boost our chances of success?
The lecture reminds us to be kind to ourselves. Change is hard, and there will be times when we slip up or fall short of our goals.
We're all human, right?
Yeah.
We're not robots programmed for perfect execution.
Exactly. And the lecture encourages us to view these setbacks as opportunities for learning rather than as failures. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? What can I do differently next time?
That's a much more constructive approach than beating ourselves up for not being perfect.
Right. And the lecture emphasizes that self-compassion is essential for staying motivated and keeping those positive changes going. When we're kind to ourselves, we're more likely to pick ourselves up and try again.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in terms of putting these principles into practice. Self-assessment, SMART goals, breaking down those goals, building habits, and being kind to ourselves. Is there anything else we should keep in mind as we embark on this journey toward greater effectiveness?
The lecture ends with a powerful reminder that effectiveness is a journey, not a destination. There's no finish line, no point at which we can say, okay, I'm effective now, I can check that off my list.
It's an ongoing process of growth and development, right?
Exactly. And the lecture encourages us to approach this journey with a sense of curiosity, excitement, and a willingness to experiment.
It's not about striving for some unattainable ideal of perfection, but about continually learning, growing, and adapting.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that what works for one person may not work for another. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to effectiveness. It's about finding what works for you, for your unique circumstances and goals.
I love that. It's about personalizing these principles and making them our own.
Exactly. And the lecture emphasizes that the most important thing is to keep moving forward, even if it's just one small step at a time.
Okay, so we've got our marching orders, we've got our tools, our strategies, and our mindsets in place. Now it's time to take action.
Right. And remember, we don't have to do it alone. The lecture emphasizes the importance of building a supportive network, surrounding ourselves with people who encourage us, inspire us, and challenge us to grow.
That's so important. We're social creatures and we thrive in connection with others, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, or mentors. Having a supportive community can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And the lecture even suggests seeking out communities or groups that align with our goals, where we can connect with like-minded individuals who share our values and aspirations.
I love that idea. It's about finding our tribe, our people who understand our struggles and celebrate our wins.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Effectiveness isn't just about achieving external success or checking things off our to-do lists. It's about living a life that feels meaningful and aligned with our deepest values.
That's such an important reminder. It's not just about what we do, it's about who we are and how we show up in the world.
Precisely. And when we approach effectiveness from that perspective, it becomes less about striving and more about becoming.
It's about becoming the best versions of ourselves in all areas of our lives.
Exactly. And that's a journey that's worth taking.
Okay, we've done a lot of unpacking in this second part of our deep dive. We've explored practical strategies for turning knowledge into action, emphasized the importance of self-compassion and support, and reminded ourselves that effectiveness is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
It's been a rich conversation, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to take all this in and start applying it to their own lives.
Absolutely. But before we dive into the final part of our deep dive, we want to give you a moment to pause and reflect. Think back to that question we posed earlier. What one small step can you take today to start moving in the right direction?
We'll be back in a moment to share some final thoughts and explore some specific ideas for taking action. But for now, take a moment to connect with yourself and consider what resonates most deeply with you. What's one small step you're willing to commit to?
Until then, happy reflecting.
Hmm.
All right, welcome back to the show. I feel like we've been on this amazing journey together, haven't we?
We have. It's been a deep dive for sure.
It has. All those different aspects of effectiveness coming together. It's really got me thinking about, how I can apply all this to my own life.
Yeah, definitely. It's not just about understanding these concepts. It's about actually putting them into action.
Exactly. So let's get back to that question we posed earlier. You know that one small step we can take today to start moving in the right direction?
All right. What resonated with you most?
Well, we talked about work-life integration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I really struggle with, constantly feeling like I'm juggling all these different roles
Right.
and never fully present in any of them.
Yeah.
So my small step today, I think, is going to be to create a buffer zone
Oh, interesting.
between work and personal time.
Okay.
Just like a little bit of space to kind of decompress and transition.
I like that.
What do you think?
That sounds great. What will your buffer zone look like?
Something simple, like maybe a 30-minute no-phone walk after work,
Oh, that's nice.
just to kind of transition out of work mode and fully step into my evening without, dragging the stress of the day along with me.
I love that idea. It's about creating those intentional transitions and preventing that always-on feeling
Yeah.
that can really lead to burnout.
Exactly. And I think it ties in beautifully with the whole message of the lecture, that effectiveness is a holistic pursuit. It's not about rigidly separating work and life, but finding ways to weave them together
Yeah.
more seamlessly.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you're really well on your way to creating that integration.
Thanks. I'm going to give it a try. What about you? What small step are you committing to today?
Well, for me, I was really drawn to what the lecture said about the importance of strong relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So my small step today is going to be reaching out to a friend I haven't spoken to in a while and scheduling a coffee date.
I love that. Nurturing those connections is so important. And sometimes it really is just those small gestures that make a big difference.
It really is. Small, consistent actions over time.
Makes a big impact. Well, we've shared our small steps. Now we want to hear from you.
Yes.
What one small step will you take today to start moving towards greater effectiveness? It doesn't have to be anything huge. Even a tiny action can create that ripple effect of positive change.
Absolutely. Maybe it's spending 5 minutes writing down your top 3 priorities for the day, or having a meaningful conversation with someone you care about.
Yeah. Maybe it's getting outside in nature to clear your head.
Whatever it is, choose something that resonates with you and that you can realistically commit to.
And remember, consistency is key. It's those small, consistent actions over time that really add up. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins along the way.
Absolutely. Acknowledge your progress no matter how small it might seem. Give yourself some credit.
Exactly, because those small wins build momentum and keep us motivated. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a sense of possibility and empowerment.
These tools and insights we've explored, they're all within your reach. It's up to you to choose what works for you.
Yeah. And how you want to make it your own. Effectiveness is not a destination, it's a journey. It's a journey that's best traveled with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to experiment.
Absolutely. And most importantly, to be kind to yourself along the way.
So keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep. We're so excited to see what you accomplish on your journey toward greater effectiveness.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care.